Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order our SEAC meeting for Thursday, May 19th, 2022. I'd like to begin with the land acknowledgement. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississauga-Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. I'd like to follow with the Human Rights and Equity Statement. The Durham District School Board is committed to learning environments that are safe, welcoming, respectful, equitable, accessible, inclusive, and free from discrimination, while placing human rights and equity at the center. And then I'd like to note that we have regrets from Donna Edgebean, a member at large. And I would also like to welcome our guests for this evening. We have Lisa Virtue, our speech and language pathologist, Leanne Hussey, a literacy numeracy coach, Lisa Drake, our senior manager and clinical lead, speech, language, and hearing. And we'll just go through the roll call, starting with myself, the Association for Bright Children and SEAC Chair, I'm Eva Kyriakides. Moving on to Autism Ontario. Nobody yet for Autism Ontario. The Black Parent Support Group.
I'm here, Carissa Lewis.
Great, thank you. Durham Down Syndrome Association.
Hi, Tara Kelly.
Okay. Early Years Consortium. Nobody yet. Easter Seals Ontario. Learning Disabilities Association of Durham Region.
Rowan Jarvis, present.
Okay. Member at Large.
Carolyn McLennan.
Thank you. Ontario Association for Families of Children with Communication Disorders.
Elizabeth Daniel, present.
Voice for Deaf and Harding Children. Kathy should be with us within the next 15 minutes. Trustees.
Donna Edwards, trustee for Ajax Ward 3.
Thank you. Okay, our elementary administration rep.
David Robson, DISA.
Okay.
Rima Sati, Vice Principal, Crothers Creek.
Okay, our secondary admin reps.
I haven't seen them come in yet, Eva.
Sorry?
I haven't seen them come in yet, I don't think.
Okay, they haven't come in yet, okay. And our staff.
Oh, sorry, that's just me tonight, along with Lisa. So Andrea McCauley, Superintendent of Inclusive Student Services. And Lisa is here as representative of our leadership team.
Great, thank you. Okay, we will move on then to the approval of the agenda. If everybody's agreement with the agenda, can somebody make a motion to pass the agenda, please? Donna, second by Tara, all in favor? Okay, motion passed. The approval of the minutes from April 21st, 2022. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at the minutes from April? And are there any questions or concerns with respect to those? If no, if we could get a motion to pass the minutes. Tara, second. Can I get a seconder? Donna, all in favor? Okay, minutes are passed. Moving on then to the staff reports, beginning with the administration report.
Thank you so much. So May and June always bring celebrations of student achievement, and this year we are so grateful to be able to do so both virtually and in person for our students. So tonight, as we meet as SEAC, the Durham Black Educators Network, or DBEN, hosts the DBEN Cultivating Possibilities Awards. So these awards being given to secondary students this evening highlight the engagement, leadership, and achievements of youth in grades 7 to 12, so our intermediate and senior students across all of our schools. This year, DBEN has offered 2 new rewards, which takes the offer up to 12 awards being given tonight. And what I will do is post the link to the acknowledgement of the award recipients into the chat box. The kids are absolutely inspirational in their accomplishments and their words of wisdom to us as adults. So we just acknowledge those 12 recipients this evening. We're also excited that next Thursday, we will honor 3 students from each of our secondary schools with the Student Recognition Awards being held at Brooklyn High School. And so these outstanding students, not yet announced publicly, will be honored for their exceptional contributions to their school and community, or for overcoming obstacles to achieve personal success. All of our students inspire us, challenge us to be better for them, and have so much to teach us. So we just acknowledge all of those students this evening. Mental health, well-being, and learning are intertwined. Our teams continue to feel privileged to be able to support students in all of these areas through inclusive student services, and mainly in connection with staff supporting them in schools. The changes we are making to grow in professional learning and better serve our students are evidenced in the draft special education plan for 22-23. And a reminder to SEAC members that feedback is always welcome and is important for the writing of the plan annually, as well as the programming considerations for students and families. So following SEAC this evening, the draft plan for 22-23 will be finalized in preparation for publishing it publicly and sharing it with our trustees at June Standing Committee prior to submission to the Ministry of Education. And that was a change in sequence and timing this year, so that we will be published prior to the end of the school year with that transparency all in place. We do draw attention to a few key sections of the special education plan where updates particularly have been made, both in terms of professional learning, in linkage to something Donna will speak about, referral process, as well as updates to our staffing. Specific to our staffing over the past 2 years, we have had additional professionals augmented above base district amounts through funds such as supports for students, COVID response dollars, a draw on the special education reserve, and other project-based opportunities. Within the proposed budget this year, we have moved to make those roles permanent with mental health positions, specifically social work and psychological services positions, previously additional to the model through temporary funding, gained through the new mental health and well-being bundle, which is now embedded in the GSN. This year, we are proposing as well that we implemented a pilot program with well-being youth workers, and within the draft budget, propose formalizing that role within our complement of services as well. Because that role is key to both educator learning as well as direct Tier 2 student services. And then just in closing, May each year always brings a focus on transitions, and that remains true this year as we have high volumes of students shifting from our online school back into in-person with a quite dramatic change in enrollment for DDSB at home at both elementary and secondary, with students being welcomed back and families making that choice, as well as we are noting that we are close to 500 additional students as a growth enrollment district in that regard. So just a focus on transitions always, but particularly when we know that those are those moves, the boundary review in Whitby, the virtual to in-person, as I said, the growth enrollment, as well as the opening, particularly at the secondary level, of a number of new classes. And so we just really have a focus on a special attunement to that. And so just with that, we remain thankful of our families and caregivers and our staff across all roles, but most importantly, our kids, for the privilege of being part of their supports. And that would be our administrative report to this month. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Andrea with respect to the administrator's report? No. Andrea, I have one question for the special education plan. When is it going to be finalized? Will we have some time to give some more input and go through it a little more thorough?
We can. We are pretty tight to getting it prepared for standing. And that's why we had been asking over the last few months for input, kind of what changes you would like to see reflected. But that being said, I do consider that there are, and propose, if with the will of SEAC, that the special education plan has submission dates, but I kind of see it as an IEP for the system. In that regard, being able to always kind of tweak and make that as best we can for community facing. Right now, some of the standards are dominant in terms of the regulation framework. And what I'd really like to do is pull them more subtle and make the information more predominant, as well as to continue to build the accessibility of the document. So I would say it's something that we work on an ongoing basis. Feedback is always welcome, but we do have a bit of a publishing date in order to prepare the document for the standing committee package.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions?
Rowan has his head up.
Oh, Rowan, yeah. Sorry, thank you.
Yes, question just for Andrea. I don't need any specific numbers, but when you said a significant number of people were transitioning back to live, is that based on the amount that was there, is that above 50%, below? Do you have like any type of range, or is it just a whole lot?
Absolutely. So we are a board, I'll just round to 74,000. Donna, are you comfortable with that rounded? Yeah. So as a district, we're approximately 74,000 students. Our DDSB at home enrollment will be under 1,000 for the 22-23 school year, which is very significantly different. We had campuses that were twice that size when we were moving through the pandemic. And so that is a significant reduction of friends accessing virtually. But what I'll do is I'll post the link to the awards for this evening. And just as we move through some of the information tonight, I'll also go get the link to the when the draft enrollments were shared publicly through board, and post that with the page number in the chat, so you can take a look at that too, and see where the kids are coming from.
Appreciate that. I think it's also just to know what is the mindset of the families. Like,
oh,
what are
absolutely.
they thinking? Are they ready? Are they I still don't know. So saying that it's all below 1,000 definitely speaks volumes.
Yeah, we had certain programs as well that, for instance, elementary gifted was running in person and virtually. And when we looked at the kids who had placement in program as well as a family preference for online, there wasn't viability of the program through online. So we've learned a lot of information through that, and SEAC heard about that, but the numbers families were telling us overwhelmingly in terms of a wave of return to in-person, but with a group of families who are still having a virtual preference. And so we're honoring that and actually have school support programs and practical learning programs within the model, within that number as well. So it is an inclusive model for DDSB at home, CERTs, virtual learning hubs, some of our special education classes, but just on a class by class or program by program basis, we did take a look at viability, and that pulled gifted from that model for September.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tara, I saw you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess the follow-up to that, because at one point we actually had sort of like sister admin functions going on because we had such a large number. Has that sort of admin function for the at-home sort of died down with the number of students that we're now seeing? Like the vast majority of our students are now back where they should be in class?
Thank you. That's a great question. And so DDSB at home in the Durham model has always run as a full school. And that's why we kind of created the school and then the different campuses. So this year, that team of administrators is quite broad. For instance, at secondary, a principal and 3 vice principals, and at elementary, a number of principals, all with VP partners. Early years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and French immersion, all with double admins. And so that obviously shrinks. We have a principal of DDSB at home elementary with a vice principal partner, and a secondary administrator with 2 VP partners for September. And the rest of our administrators are bringing all of that accommodation and UDL knowledge back into in-person buildings with their assignments for September. And our administrators, the first wave of that was declared shared with trustees Monday night, and then published to our system on Tuesday. And so even as we talk about transitions for kids, staff are starting to be in transition, because you can imagine the volume of teachers that then impacts. So fairly intensive transitions for administrators, significant educator, EA, support staff transitions, and then a whole lot of kids on the move.
Great. Sorry, if I may, Eva.
Yep.
How are the staff coping? Because there's family preference for online because of all of this. Have we been handling the transitions for our staff as well back to in person for those who are at a level of concern or have a specific susceptibility, vulnerability? Everyone's situations are different. So how is that going? Do we still have challenges in that transition?
I haven't been directly involved in the staffing components, but we do with the, and the ministry did say boards will offer a virtual learning model for the 22-23 school year, and built that right in. There was some pretty heavy requirements within our GSN access that said you shall, like that these dollars are based on options for families, which is frightful. So we are able, for the most part, to meet any staff with accommodations related to requirement for virtual, through the sustainability of the number based on the kids and families that have picked virtual. And then we have staff too over the pandemic that have actually never taught in person as an employee for the board. They were hired in the hiring wave and brought in as NTIP teachers into DDSB at home. And so I think that's not really the vision that people go into the faculties of ed with. They look at having their classroom and their classroom community. And they've certainly done a great job of building community online. And now they're going to bring all of that knowledge into those in-person relationships. So bit of nuance. I think similar to families, there'll be people really super excited. There'll be people that are a bit uneasy. And then people grateful to stay with DDSB at home, and just how that scaffolds. The ideal is everybody lands in one of those two options of where they would want to be. And we'll try. I think the only employee group that's slightly out is our educational assistants, right? Because our number is based on student needs, and just taking a look at that and the proximity with which they work in person, fluids, personal care, and things like that. So just some extra layers of consideration and gentleness in that. But thank you for thinking of the staff as well as the kids.
Right. Thank you. Are there any other questions for Andrea? No? Okay, then we can move on to the board report with Don Edwards. Go ahead.
Okay. It seems like it was a whirlwind, our board meeting. We received our announcement of our retirement of our director. So we basically will be looking at a process as far as filling that position as well. We had a resignation of a trustee, and according to the Education Act, we can't do an election. We wouldn't anyways, but can't do an election, but we still have to fill that vacancy. We have 90 days to fill that vacancy. So we have that process to do. And who knows, we might be doing it again, depending on what happens at the provincial election as well. And that's the other thing, is that the government, basically, because it is an election mode, there's been really little coming down, and it will be all depends on who forms the next government, on how fast and how things go, as far as not sure where we're going to have a summer or not, as far as will we or won't we. We also basically had a presentation from a Durham Learning Foundation, which is the foundation that was created basically from what was the initiative, the Make-A-Wish initiative that was started out in Oshawa. They're doing the staff there, and the amount of the fundraising and the support that they provide both for students and staff has been really, really astounding for it being such a young foundation. But as I said, it was backed up from the amount of work that staff did through the Make-A-Wish Foundation. It was great to hear some of the things that it has been doing, and you can look at the report if you want to see some of the details. We also basically passed the human rights and anti-discrimination and anti-racism policy, as well as the revised safe and respectful workplace and harassment prevention policy. So at this point in time, then staff will be looking at the implementation and the training and the PD professional learning that is required around those policies. We also got a notice of motion, basically, so that's where we're going to be looking at in June for the revised emergency closing of school policy. We've recirculated some surplus property to be purchased that has been sitting, and that's Cartwright High School, former HW Knight Public School. Hopefully that it be sold off and those funds could deal with our EDC issues as far as that's concerned, our education development charges as well. We had an annual report from our integrity commissioner, and that was basically a new integrity commissioner that we had basically received through an RFP process, which was the first time we had done that. So he presented, well, he didn't, but the report was sent. I'm trying to think. I think that is about it. Just that the Ontario Public School Board Association is also going to be having its annual general meeting November 9th to the 11th, I believe it is, in Ottawa. So we will be looking at elections for the executive and places as far as that's concerned. Already to, as I said, to get into running mode whenever our new government gets established from that perspective. And that's about it.
Thank you, Donna. Is there any questions for Donna with respect to the board report? No? Okay, then we can move on to the Inclusive Student Services Department report with Lisa Drake.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Happy Speech, Language, and Hearing Month. May is our Speech, Language, and Hearing Awareness Month, and it's always exciting to get to reach out to people to let them know. Historically, the teams have done quite a bit of work in person to promote speech, language, and hearing, and other communication challenges and the supports that are available within the school system. This is our third year of doing a virtual social media campaign. We were sort of at that point where starting to plan it, we maybe were going to be able to return to in person, but we weren't sure what was going to happen. So we have a virtual awareness campaign again this year, and hopefully we'll be back to in person again next year. The teams have been doing quite a bit of work lately around getting ready for kids coming into the system next year. Most recently, the speech and language team has been supporting all of the Great Beginnings, Get Ready, Welcome to Kindergarten events. This year, they offered a series of virtual offerings to families across the district so that any family anywhere could access. And our team did a presentation in collaboration with Grandview's preschool speech and language program to be able to help families, especially for those who are not yet in our system, get support if they need it and get them to the right places and try and get them as ready as possible to communicate in kindergarten. And then all of the school-based speech pathologists have been working in schools during the in-person events to get to know families and kids and be able to answer any questions they might have. Our hearing resource team, as well as the speech pathologists, have also been working really, really hard to receive any intake packages that we're getting that highlight any extra support that might be needed or any assistance that we can provide at this point in time. So that's been a big focus for both the teams. Switching gears a little bit, one of our big goals that we've had on the speech and language team this year, we identified this at the beginning of the school year, was to really focus on ensuring that we had across the team a consistent knowledge base around structured literacy in anticipation of the right to read results being released, which they were in February. And that was really exciting for us because the team has been working for so long to really try to promote what the literature tells us best practices in reading are, and supporting educators and kids through that. And so this was really big for our team to be able to hear what the Ontario Human Rights Commission findings were and start to really think about how we can continue to support the system. So on that note, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to introduce you to our other two guests because they're really the stars of this discussion, and I'm excited for you to hear what they're about to share. So I'll introduce you to Lisa Virtue and Leanne Hussey. We've been really lucky this year to have this pair of an SLP and a literacy coach come together in partnership within a special project that we were able to put together this year. And the goal of the project was to help educators in our younger early years and K-2 classes within some very specific schools to work through education and coaching to really see a shift in their literacy practices. So Lisa and Leanne are going to share some information about that project. So thank you very much for being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Is it okay if we share a screen? Leanne, I think, do you have it pulled up?
No, it just says that screen sharing is disabled.
Ali, do you mind releasing for Leanne to share?
And while they're doing that, I'll just say thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity to talk about the K-2 Literacy Project. Leanne and I just have been so excited and passionate about this project, and we're so happy to bring to you an overview of the project and some of the successes that we've experienced. We started the project in November. I think it was a late start project, but we have been glued at the hips since November, supporting educators and students in shifting change. So as soon as Leanne has it up, we can give you an overview.
Sorry, Lisa, do you mind sharing? I just, I had to
no
switch
problem.
It seemed to
no problem.
do it.
Am I able to get permission to share?
Ali, are you there? One moment.
Yes, you can share right now.
Thank you, Ali.
All right. So this is our K-2 literacy project. And let's just get that out of the way. Here we go. So this is how Leanne and I have felt since the beginning. And so excited to be here. I'm Lisa Virtue. I'm a speech language pathologist, and I'll let Leanne introduce herself.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Leanne Hussey, and I'm the literacy coach on the project. Just like Lisa, I'm also very excited to share with you some of the work that we have been doing over the last couple of months. I was going to say Lisa Virtue, but Lisa Drake gave a wonderful overview of the project. But just to give a little bit more of a background, the K-2 Literacy Project is just a collaboration between a speech language pathologist and a literacy coach, just to help guide how educators teach children to read and to write based on the science of reading research. So this was actually a one-year project that was funded by the Re-Engagement and Reading Assessment Support Ministry grant.
Yeah, so this unique collaboration, and it's unique because I don't know there's any other board that decided to use this funding from the speech pathologists that we've connected with and other boards. And it was created by our wonderful managers in Inclusive Student Services, Lisa Drake, and in Curriculum, Linda Fordicuna. And it allowed, for Leanne and I, this collaborative piece allowed us to bring together the knowledge of development of language and learning how to read and write and what happens in the brain from a speech language pathologist, knowing that written language is actually speech sounds in print, with the perspective of a literacy coach and the experience of a classroom teacher. So we were able to take that scientific evidence and support easily manageable shifts with our educators to support all student success in reading and writing.
And so this partnership between a speech language pathologist and a literacy coach really worked, because if you really look at it, learning to read and write is actually very complex. There's a lot that goes into that. It really requires that knowledge of the brain and how the brain learns to read and what are the processes that are going on when the brain is learning to write. And then you need to pair that with really strong instructional practices in the classroom so that the science and practice really align so that our students really get the full benefit. And so our partnership brought together the skills of a speech language pathologist and a literacy coach in order to just increase our project educator efficacy, their knowledge of the subject matter, and then their know-how in order to implement these practices in the class. And we really zoomed in on doing that through professional development and in-class collaborations.
Yeah, and so, the results that we've seen are an increase in student joy and efficacy in learning to read and write, and that's for all students in the class. So it was a tier 1 approach, but the impact that we've seen has been across all of the students in the classroom, and we have some emerging evidence from our educators and support for that too.
And Lisa actually mentioned this before, just talking about the uniqueness of our project. We've actually met with other teams who are exploring similar work in other areas. And what we found and what they've also commented on was how they were either missing the connection to a speech language pathologist in their team, or they were missing the connection with an educator or with a literacy coach in their team. So either one of the pieces were missing, but our unique partnership here at DDSB, having the speech language pathologist and the literacy coach, resulted in what we have kind of coined our literacy implementation model. And it's just a very easily adaptable model that through our project, we've kind of seen shifts in educator practices. And we've actually used that same model to help onboard full-time literacy tutors this spring.
Yeah, so that was something that throughout our project, we were able to sort of create the supports and the implementation of each piece in structured literacy. So looking at teaching kids letter sounds and teaching them to pay attention to the sounds and words. And what we did was chunk the learning for our educators. So it brought together the science and the practice in a format that the educators felt really comfortable implementing. It was easy to understand. And when the educators were comfortable and felt safe in implementing these small manageable shifts, they were better able to engage in that student learning through each of those shifts. It wasn't too much information for them. It was just easily implemented. And they would often come back to us and say, okay, what's next? What's next? I've done this, it's working, what's next? So this model also positions our educators ahead of the changes coming to the language curriculum in 2023. So it places them at a position where they're already implementing some structured literacy practices. And throughout the project, Leanne and I were able to take some of the initial professional development that we provided to educators and really pare it down into 2 5-minute videos that are look-fors for our educators. So when a student is writing, what are some look-fors and how does that connect to the science of the brain? And also for when a student is reading. So what are the key look-fors for educators? So it's always student-driven. Anything we did is not a program that we just blanketly layer on all kids. It's a process, and we're looking at individual students and how classrooms are doing. So we're also able to create those and And after educators watched those videos, they were able to really take the information and go, okay, I know what I'm doing with my students now, and I know what I'm looking for. So
just as we're about to share a little video with a compilation of kind of all the documented or some of the documented success with some of the practices that we've implemented through our model. But Lisa and I are really convinced the more that we're in this work of just how important it is. And the ultimate impact of our project has really been in observing our students and observing our educators just experience that joy with interacting with literacy learning and really developing their identities as readers and writers.
So we hope you enjoy this little compilation of we just want to share joy with you around the impact of our project.
Lisa, do you mind turning up the sound?
On the share screen toolbar, there is a 3 dots. If you click on those 3 dots, they will give you option to share sound.
Apple. What other sound does A make? A. A and A makes 2.
But I want everybody to feel their mouth. Hands under your chin. What's your tongue doing? Where's your tongue when you say at? On the bottom. Kind of at the bottom, right? And it
Blend it. Rid.
blend it. Ici c'est oh, on va commencer avec le premier son, s'il vous plaît. No. Est-ce que ça c'est 3 times? Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. P-O-T says pause. You guys know this. Letters are L sound is and letters are S and sound is. What's the special spelling rule for words that end with l or s? Yes, Odessa.
Flossy words.
They're flossy words. So what does the flossy words mean? What kind of vowel is it? Is it a short vowel or is it a long vowel?
Short.
It's a short vowel. So who can give me a word that ends with the that has a short vowel sound? Remember, a short vowel would be like letter is A. Short sound is ah. Who could give me a word that ends in yes?
Fluff.
Fluff.
Sound is ch. 3 words that start with ch. Acadia.
Chinese.
Chinese, excellent. Joshua.
Chicken.
Chicken, excellent. Lily.
Chili.
Awesome. Okay.
is it off both times?
No.
No. If you are a careful reader, you would have done off the first time. And then you notice they're the same letters, but you notice it's a different order, so it's going to make a different sound. B, ah, b. That's such a great observation. I really love that you brought that up. Good job, Jordy.
I had students in September who said that they couldn't read. They were grade 2 students reading at a level A, the Fontes Pinel level A, claimed they couldn't read at all, and I had no way to move them, no idea how to move them, no abilities, no knowledge on how to do it, no time to move these kids, and they are now very confidently reading at level C's and level D's. And I see their ability to segment words, their ability to blend words together, recognize the letter sounds and the phonology of it all. And I mean, they're confident readers. They're identifying themselves as readers now.
I did it.
You did. So we'll just leave you, with this quote that learning to read is not a thrill. It's not a privilege. It's a basic and essential skill. And this is something that Leanne and I truly believe in. And I'll just go back to the quote because there we go, and pause it. It's a human right. And I think that's what the Ontario Human Rights Commission report clearly states as well. And as a part of this project, we have been able to see this and see it spread in our classrooms and with our educators and with our students, all saying that I did it. Oop. We'll go on. You can do it, slideshow. Leanne usually presents. Sorry about that. And I apologize. I'm not as techie as my literacy coach partner, and I couldn't get the closed caption going. So I do apologize for that. So thank you. That is it for our presentation. I'll stop sharing. But thank you so much for allowing us to share that with you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic. It's nice to see those kind of results. Does anybody have any questions with respect to the presentation? Tara, and then Elizabeth. Go ahead.
This was a pilot process function. What was the target demographic for the programming? So, because I know there's various difficulty, like were we targeting for children who have developmental delays, who are nonverbal, who have learning disabilities, and different types of issues relating to speech and writing and that sort of thing? Like what was the intent, and then is the plan to be able to adapt for all students?
And so the purpose of the project was a tier 1 approach so that educators were able to provide strategies. However, the information and materials and the shifts that the educators were focusing on and were coached through, it's a process. So it is not a program that applies just to one tier. It's giving the educators the knowledge of what goes into an effective reading program based on the brain science, and it's individualized based on the classroom or the students. That it was always student driven. So educators originally, we were like, this is whole class. Educators were coming back to us, as you could see in some of the comments, saying, I didn't know what to do with my tier 2 and 3 kids. And the educators actually having the knowledge of how the brain learns how to read and the skills that go into learning to read, they were able to apply that process to all the students in their class to support development and progress with the students. So we collected data for our project, or are collecting data. We're not done it yet. It's done at the end of June. And we had for each class 3 sort of tier 1 students and 2 tier 2 students. So that's the data, but I think the impact statements speak pretty clearly to all the students in the class.
Thank you. Elizabeth, you had your hand up, then Rowan, then Donna.
Yeah, thank you for the enthusiasm in this area. Literacy is really important, and it's really exciting, all of the developments that are happening in that world. My question was kind of similar to Tara's. I was thinking about the presentation, put it forward as if we were looking at teaching strategies. And I was wondering how easily adaptable it would be to individual strategies, and maybe including these strategies into IEPs. And also about how adaptable it would be into virtual teaching too.
So we have, I'll address the virtual, sorry, Leanne, I'll address the virtual and then maybe. So we actually, with the funding that was released by the ministry for tutoring, Leanne and I were asked to onboard our tutors that were doing the intervention with students for reading. So they were full-time literacy tutors that were hired by the board. So we onboarded both in-person and virtual, and are continuing to support our virtual tutors. So everything we rolled out in the project was it wasn't a like, this is the first step, second step, third step that you do. It was always look at the student that you have, look at the assessment data that for that student, and you build the program for that student or for that group of students. And what we rolled out was all virtual. So it was all in Google folders, in Google Slides, in Google presentations. There was online games to play. So it was very easily adaptable for our virtual tutors. I don't know if you have anything to add, Leanne.
No, that's perfect, Lisa. With regards to what we shared in the presentation, just going back to what Lisa had previously said, because it is a process and not a program, and it's really driven on assessment. When we speak with the educators through PD, we really talk about the importance of being responsive. It really comes down to knowing every student. And so in taking this approach on an IEP, instead of noting that my student is at a certain level in reading, for instance, using fonts and Pinnell, I can actually be a little bit more specific. I can talk a little bit about how I'm noticing that students have certain letter sound correspondences. I can talk about how a student might know those correspondences but not be able to blend them together. And then now, I think some of the impact statements actually spoke to this piece as well. Now, not only are educators starting to notice this more as something more tangible that they can relate to parents to sort of help parents also support their students at home, but they now know what to do with it. They now have the tools to pull from to help students in those areas.
Thank you. Rowan, I see your hands up.
Yeah, first of all, I think it's great. I think, to echo what Elizabeth said, anytime we're really focusing on developing systems to help the children learn to read and to improve, I get excited. You were referring to the science-based methods for the children to learn. I didn't hear, we're with the Learning Disability Association Durham Region, we see the evidence-based learning as a real science-based approach, including things such as like letter sound connections, the rhymings, and the sound manipulations. Was that employed in the systems that you're using, or is that it is? I was just kind of curious.
Yeah, so the project, we know that what goes into really great reading is having that strong oral language foundation of vocabulary and comprehension. And then we know that there's also that letter sound correspondence, really knowing your letter sound correspondences and automatically. It's not just knowing them and being able to think about it for a minute or two. You know, what does T say? It's knowing when you see a T, you say T. So that was a really strong focus of our project. And actually the funding was for phonics, so letter sounds, and phonological phonemic awareness. So that was the real focus of our project, because we know so many educators are doing those really rich oral language experiences, and we wanted to bring the phonics and phonemic awareness. So being able to hear a word like cat and know it's made up of tiny speech sounds, k, ah, t. So that's really was the crux of our focus, was building the we called them routines for our educators so that they knew that it wasn't a one and done approach. It's a routine that you embed into your daily lessons. And, you know, even having educators take one phonics routine and embed that for 2 weeks, the difference in the kids because we ran on 2-week cycles, the difference when Leanne and I were able to go back in and see the kids being like, I'm a reader, I'm a writer. And the teachers saying, I can't believe how much progress they made, and being able to generalize that to other words, even though they haven't focused on those sound letter correspondences. So the success was in bringing those pieces to the forefront, but also making it easily adoptable by the educators to implement those small shifts in routines in their day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Donna, you have your hand up?
Thank you. I wish I would have had this done in detail at an OPSPA meeting that we had a couple of weekends ago, because I know that this one board was praising that they're already putting things in, and I knew we were doing this stuff, but the detail would have really helped when I felt like saying, well, we've already done it. But anyways, because at that meeting, we actually had the Human Rights Commissioner, Patricia DeGuyer, who came and spoke about the right to read and the importance of understanding basically the science of speech, but also particularly around the sounds and decoding and all that. So this is really, really good. I do have a question, but I personally, I find it interesting because this also shows my age, because my two children went through different, and my one child actually went when we had, if you remember, animated literacy. That was being taught throughout the board. Well, not everywhere, but was being used as just one thing, but then it ended. And I like the continuum, and that the fact it's not, the ability to build on it and continue it going between kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2. I think that's phenomenal, because that will help our students that are struggling, as that teacher made a reference to, as far as, having students that were saying they weren't readers, but then what those skills that he was taught, he could help them. So I think that's really great. So when we talk, this was a pilot project sort of thing, whatever. I'm looking at summer programming when we have, hopefully they're going to happen, was basically getting ready for school programs again. Are we going to ensure those teachers that were part of this maybe be part of that, so we can get the early sort of assessment, the early identification for those kids that are coming into the school to help out with that, and then ensuring that this continues on to further provide basically the learning and so forth for other teachers throughout the system. And I'm not only talking about elementary, because I can also see this used in some of our secondary, some of our programs as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrea.
Is that all right? So thank you to all of you for the tremendous feedback. We are super excited, right, about both the professional dialogue about getting kids excited about the joy of reading and that access point, their success. And then you saw and heard, right, the joy of the educators in being successful in supporting the kids' success. And that really is the magic of education. We're still at infancy of kind of how do we do this? How do we scale this, right? Because Certainly hear you, Donna, on the how do we get more kids access to those that are doing these great things that are having results, right? And so Lisa, Drake, and I were with Superintendent Negro and Linda Fortacuna just this afternoon. We spent the afternoon on that exact question of, so what are we learning and how do we scale? And certainly with an eye elementary to secondary and with our learners who require it to be just that little bit different or different pacing or cognizant of their AAC, like how do we build a system? So we have some ideas. We're not quite ready to put them out in the world, but certainly looking at how do you take the incredibleness that is Lisa Virtue's and Leanne Hussey's expertise, not only in what they know, but in how they interact with educators to inspire open spaces where it's okay to ask questions and not know and change practice. And so we're just looking at how do we scale that, both in terms of the strategies, the resources, and just how do we get into professional learning spaces to actually shift programs for kids. So we are noting the success of the program. Again, tremendous kudos to both Lisa and Leanne. And how do we, but essentially the shortest answer to our work this afternoon, I think, Lisa, was it is everybody's work. Across curriculum, across early years, across equity, across ISS. So how do we intentionally scaffold that? Because sending out an email and a memo isn't going to change the experience of our kids or educators. So it's how do we as a system support that scaffolded learning? We're not quite there yet on a full big district plan, but we're really excited and have lots of thoughts.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's just that to get that continued momentum is really, really important. As you said, you mentioned that I'm just looking at some of our priority schools and that sort of that early assessment, that early, which, you know, with this it would really make it beneficial to, as you said, everybody. Because one of the comments that the commissioner basically had said is that it's to reach everyone because, you know, it's that equity piece as well. So I just want to make sure that that continuing happens. And I know you guys, you are very good at trying to scale things. It's really exciting to hear that. And I just see just the potential to be really, really great. Because as said, on a personal note, things like animated literacy wasn't really around when my daughter first started, but I paid for private speech, which shouldn't be happening. But we used Jolly Phonics, and when she was in grade 1, she was the best decoder in the class. She couldn't say the names of the letters perfectly. She knew all the sounds, the combinations, and so forth, but she was the best decoder, which I believe also, of course, it then leads to comprehension and everything else like that as well, because that's the whole thing. It's the whole part. It's not just about speech. It's about hearing and everything else. It's the whole brain, as you said, the brain science about it. So pleased to see that that is somewhat started and we're ahead of the game. I want it to continue.
Yeah, I think a lot of the boards are doing work. I think we're well positioned, not just in terms of the breadth of roles and how they're positioned, but the actual who's in them. In terms of, as you saw from our 3 professionals this evening, bringing that forward. So credit to Lisa Drake's leadership with Linda, as well as Lisa and Leanne's work in classrooms, and of course the educators in those rooms, and then the rockstar kids that are the readers amongst us that we're learning from as we go as well.
Thank you. Are there any other questions with respect to the presentation? I would reiterate, like, that's some great work that I'm happy to see. I know animated literacy was a big thing in our home when my kids were younger, and it made a big difference in their reading and writing as they move forward. So that's great to see on a wider scale, and I'm looking forward to seeing that sort of sort of ramped up and moved across the system over time. So thank you very much. If there's no more questions, we'll move on to our open discussion period. We had circulated with the package the last Special Education Advisory Committee survey that was done in 2015, I think was the last one that was done. We sort of geared it up to do, or we're looking at doing it in 2017, and it was sort of decided that we hadn't received enough feedback initially from previous years, that we just sort of gave it a rest kind of thing. But, it is something that, I don't know that it's necessarily something we need to do every couple of years, but I would say we need to do it at least every 4 or 5 years. Just so that we're getting bigger feedback from the, students and parents of students across, or caregivers of students across the board. Because, while some of us know, some parents know that we exist, many don't. And this is a great way for us to get some feedback from them, hopefully. If we can get it, the interest, and maybe now that it's been a while, there'll be parents who are interested in doing it and filling it out. I don't know if have everybody had a chance to actually look at it? And I'm just curious as to have any comments on the one sort of as it was set up previously, and things that maybe you would like to see changed. Donna, go ahead.
I'm just looking at it from an equity point of lens, and I was looking for you. There's some things in here that we wouldn't ask or provide an option, saying basically as says prefer not to say, as far as that's concerned. I know that because I was around when this thing was developed, and we went through a couple of iterations, I do remember administrators saying they really liked some of the feedback that came back from this as far as addressing some of the issues. I also do know that it was felt like it was pretty lengthy, and some parents, and I think it might even be parents or caregivers, couldn't identify what their necessarily their placement sometimes, or they were confused and there was a tie-in. So I think it has to be looked at from a couple of lenses, and also maybe not as long. I think the last one we also did, we both sent out by mail. We figured that sending it out by mail and having it electronically didn't really change the amount of it, but I still think it's a valuable piece of data, specifically for SEAC. There was frustration around that things didn't change. The answers and the percentages didn't seem to change, but I think it's something that we need to see to basically to monitor and see if things are working and things are happening, and parents have an understanding of what SEAC's role is and what is available to them too. So I think it needs a lot of work before it goes out, in other words, making it short.
For sure. Andrea, I see that you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I did a pre-meeting with assessment and accountability. So we actually have a research and data team that will help us out with this, which is great. So they're kind of wondering that we got together just to bring for SEAC's feedback is, when the last surveys went, we were kind of at the infancy of conversation around the student census. And also the positive school climate survey has also undergone quite a bit of change as well. So contextually, the SEAC, so we could have within the 22-23 school year, which I think is our target, is to prepare this and have it ready and be ready to go, is we will have student census, positive school climate, and the SEAC survey. And so when we look at how much we can connect data in the background, the question that came, and really one that I think is primary for SEAC to kind of discuss and figure out is what is your intended focus of what you hope to get out the other side of the data? Because there's a couple different items that we need. So when we think about one of our accountabilities to you and to our families is how are the kids doing, and how do we know that the programs and services, what impact are they having, and where are there areas we need to improve? We're going to be able to get that when we tie the student census data to student achievement data. And again, there's all kinds of protections around small data sets. But for example, I think of recent reports in terms of children and youth and bias and racism within the school system, and what are the differentiated impacts. We also need to have that intersecting with special education supports and services in order to know where are there barriers and impacts on our students, and where are we disentangling and rewriting the system in terms of that. So we're going to be able to do some of that with the student census. So wondering if the SEAC survey isn't so much about what are those pieces that we can already get at through the other ones, but what is family satisfaction with programs and services, or involvement in processes such as, did you have voice in the development of the IEP prior to the 30th day, right? Like in terms of that, is it consultation after the 30th day? I'm not so sure. Consultation is within the first 30 as it's being developed, right? So it just, one of the wonders was, if you look at what data you hope to get out of, or understanding that you hope to get at the other end of the survey, then we design it backwards from there. And then, as Donna said, there's lots that the system's grown up in understanding since 2017 in a lot of ways. Lots of learning over the last 5 years that would have to be obviously reflected respectfully in that. But Chris and Leslie's comments were, if you work it backwards from what kind of information do you hope at the other end that informs SEAC and informs SEAC consultative to the board on programs and services, then we can pull it back and kind of frame it. The other aspect that he had just said, keep in mind, is that with electronic means, we can make the survey a bit intuitive so that parents and caregivers aren't always seeing long lists of things that may not be applicable to them. They can route all the pathways in the back that if you answer this, then here are the questions that actually apply to the programs and services for your child, rather than are you supported by, no, or yes, no. That the survey itself can have some intuition built into it based on that. But really, their big question is, what is the focus and primary outcome and story that you're interested in hearing at the end, and then how do we get the questions to give you that information? And Chris and Leslie, both members of our A&A team, have the June SEAC in their calendars to come help us with more of the content and some feedback around that as well. They're both going to attend in June and then do some work for us over the summer. But really, what is it that you want to know more about from families and caregivers? And just that wondering if it's around program and service satisfaction or something completely different at the will of SEAC.
Okay, thank you. Kathy, I see you have your hand up.
Hi, apologies for being late. We're just coming out of COVID isolation, so I'm in transition. I guess I feel like I have obligations to come back to that conversation about 2017 a little bit for those who weren't there, but I really am at a loss to know what information we even are gathering. I know that we get numbers once a year on class, like how many, like placement, for example. So once a year we get the, this is how many students are in this program. This is how many students are in this program. This is how many students are identified with this designation. That's about all we look at very regularly. And I guess before we can even answer what do we want, I guess my question would be, where is the intersection of those other tools and that layer of, because I feel like as a parent, I do check off, yes, my child has an IEP consistently when I'm doing school climate or whatever. And so I guess part of the question I would have is, it's great there's more tools for intersection, but when I don't know what information we have from families, I'm wondering, how do we know what we're not knowing, or what we do know, or we already are asking, but SEAC isn't necessarily seeing? And I don't know if that makes sense, but I think that we want to know what voice, like, I don't think a survey can educate people. And I think we almost want it to, like, to show people that there are services available and supports available and people available and all those things. I wonder if it's about, I don't know, like, part of me just wishes we had a stop, start, continue after every IPRC, where people have a chance to say, here's what's going well, here's something I'd like to change, and here's something I don't know about. And that's it. Because that anecdotal open-endedness might give me way more information to help serve families than anything else.
Yeah, I think some of this discussion was around, or came about just talking about the perception families have compared to maybe what the policies at the board are, and trying to see. So from my perspective, I think with a survey is, I would like not, I'm not concerned particularly sort of how many kids identify in what areas, for example. I'm concerned about what the process is and how that's being followed, like, are parents receiving the information regularly, right? Like, when they, when their child is presenting with needing an assessment, what information is being given to them on how that process happens, how that moves forward. If they are identified, the IPRC process is happening. Are they being, given the handbook? Are they being given the options of a variety of things, or is it being presented only in this is your option kind of thing? So I just want to see, for me, along the way, yeah, you're right, like the IEP input, is that happening sort of before the development of the IEP? Is the IEP truly being looked at each and every year? Because a lot of times you hear from parents, and I know even from my own experience, where that IEP just seems to just continue until a parent says, wait, we need to make some changes. It tends to just carry forward. Yep, that looks good. Yep, that looks good. And I understand there's a lot of IEPs to be written at the beginning of the school year, but that is that document really truly being used as a living, breathing, sort of constantly changing document that's meant to evolve with the student, right? Strengths and needs should not constantly remain the same type of thing. So how is that input being received, from parents? Like, how are they being brought into that process where they're being asked annually, what do you see your child's strengths and needs are this year? That sort of thing. That's kind of my idea of the kind of information I'd like to see. Tara, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'm following along with both of you on that. I think that the level of specificity that you see in the existing one is like, what's your placement? What region are you in? Like, back to what Andrew said, we can get that data from a student census, so we don't need to ask the parents again. You already know where my kid is. Those sorts of things. Again, we're not back into individual people, and the intention of this was never to know, what does Jimmy think? Like, we don't care what Jimmy thinks. We want to know what the system as a whole is saying. And to me, it's more about we have great policies and we have great procedures and we have a lot of really great things to offer. How is that translating down at the execution to the individual student and the individual school level? Because I have heard so many stories. You get those stories from the parents all the time to say, I didn't get this, or I'm not getting the support that I need at this school, or this teacher doesn't get it. And we've had conversations. So it's sort of like, we need to, for me, it's how do I get the parents to be better advocates for themselves? Are they aware of their rights? Are they aware of the processes and the procedures that are there? because that's been one of our other themes as well. Is not just them knowing about us, knowing about how they can be better advocates for their kids. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here, is I want to be able to help the parents form those relationships and form those collaborative teams with the staff and with the administrations. And those are going to change over time. Like you said, things are going to change, but we need the parents to feel that they are comfortable and have those says. And so can we bring that? Because if I don't feel that I have any say in the matter, I'm not going to bother filling in the survey, because it's not going to matter. No matter what I say, it's just never going to change. And that's the attitude that I want to see. Is that attitude out there? And if that is so, then that informs us in some ways that we need to make adjustments and to make recommendations to the board to say, hey, we're not getting it. It's not translating. That's my big one.
Yeah. And Carissa just typed in the chat. She's fully agreeing with you. Sort of echoing that. And I think that's it. I think that is the crux of what the survey. What I'd like to see from a survey is how much of the procedures and the policies and the things is trickling in through the system, where the parents know that they're there and know the true choices that they have. So that's I don't know if that helps you, Andrea, as far as informing that.
Yeah, it totally does. So what I've done is I've and I know Lisa's on the other side of the world did the same thing in terms of reporting. So I've taken a lot of notes around what you're looking to hear at the outcome. So what you're looking for it to include, really, that focus on process and how is the intent, and we call it intent and impact. So the procedures and the policies are the intention, but what is the experience of the kids and families? Voice options, IEP input, authentic updates, advocacy rights and processes. It is not about how many students in which category of exceptionality, because we already have that we can bring forward to SEAC. So I know Carolyn and Donna have their hands up. I'll keep writing as you talk, and then also Kathy's notion of how do we qualitatively grab from families information about stop, start, continue. So what are things that we just are not helpful to families? What are things that would be helpful to families? And what are things that are helpful to families that we need to continue? So I'll listen intently with Carolyn and Donna. And then my commitment is to take this to ANA and see what they can work up. And then, of course, send it ahead of June SEAC. And then Chris and Leslie will both be here that we can ask questions and mold. And but it would be nice for them to kind of think through that lens and start driving a base for us.
Absolutely. Carolyn, go ahead. Oh, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's strange to have the mute button on their headset, because sometimes you accidentally turn it on. But one of the other things, apart from the processes and how we're getting the information and our parents getting the information, is also the people interaction, because we're kind of going, well, did you get this information? Did you do this or do that? But did you have a conversation with your child's teacher? Have you had interactions with the CERT or whoever? I mean, these are some of the people that are providing this information, but we're just kind of going, well, did you get it? But did you have a conversation? Did you have a short meeting or whatever? I think we also need to maybe build that into the process, because we might find that, yeah, somebody got an envelope full of documents, but nobody spoke to them to say, do you have any questions about these forms, or do you know how to fill this out, or some of those things. I think sometimes we need to kind of also embed, what kind of personal interactions are you having with the different, whether it's teachers, administration at your child's school, that's either helping or maybe even hindering this this process? You know, what kind of relationships do you have? I think that's what I'd like to see. What kind of interactions? There are people who go, oh, I never speak to, you know, my child's teacher, or I've only had one or two conversations with the CERT, and it's usually at IPRC time. You want to make sure that there's that ongoing relationship, because then we can maybe start to see an improvement in the quality of some of the outcomes that we're looking for.
Yeah, 100%. You know, some of the comments in the chat so far. Do you have a relationship with from Tara? You know, the question: do you have a relationship with the school staff who are supporting your child? Right. Kathy Keaty says, love the suggestions from everyone. Voice, advocacy, support, agency, relationships. Yes, Carolyn. How do we ensure the feedback we're gathering allows for action? It'd be great to see if someone would like to follow up from a member of SEAC and or the school. Donna, I see you have your hand up as well. Go ahead.
Yeah. Actually, Carolyn kind of addressed it as far as that it's that interaction and the satisfactory interaction that they're having, or what needs to happen, what didn't happen, or expectations and stuff is really important. I was just going to say there, Eva, is that, you know, looking at it and so forth, I'm just wondering, saying if any, you know, because we don't have a long time to discuss this, if people actually put some questions together, if we could just forward them on to Andrea or Lisa or whatever, to say that here are some things that I want to see out of the survey as well. And then I know our group, our data and survey, our group is very good at combining those and stuff, so that they would have a really great feel of seeing commonalities and stuff and seeing where that comes. And then, or also saying that these questions actually can get answered through the school climate survey, through, you know, and so forth. And that will help as well get us to narrow down what the focus is.
Yeah, that is a good idea. I know Andrea has been frantically taking notes, but anything in writing to Andrea to sort of work with would be fantastic. I mean, I think it comes down to trying to see how the parents are really feeling the system is working for them and their children, right? And feeling supported, like, you know, that's sort of the main things. Does anybody else have anything they want to add to that? Add to the.
If you don't mind, I think this conversation is really great in terms of thinking about how we authentically hear from families. And I know we all miss being together in person, but the advantage of this live streaming tonight is that it's captured. And so we'll be able to actually share this exact conversation link with our A&A team so that they can authentically hear your voices in what you're seeking to hear from community. So notes, yes, but I think also we'll ask Chris and Leslie just to take a few minutes and to listen to this section of SEAC too, so they can hear firsthand from you as well.
Thank you, Andrea. I appreciate that. Okay. Is there anybody else have anything else they want to add to that conversation? No? Okay. Then we will move on to the business arising from the minutes. We first talked about, we talked about a request from Participation House last month with respect to a request for SEAC membership. We had sort of done some looking at the Participation House website, and some things come up as a concern. They have some services listed that are fee for service. That was part of the discussion we were having last month. We didn't have quorum to vote on anything last month. The other thing that we were discussing or that came up around it is that they receive their money, their funding from the ministry, from the government, the provincial government. So not necessarily, not from the Ministry of Education specifically, but from the government of Ontario. I kind of could be viewed as adding a ministry voice on SEAC. It's sort of, you know, the idea that if your agency relies on its funding from the provincial government, and we are actually a mandated sort of committee of the government, is that that could be possibly community-wise seen as a bit of a conflict. Tara, you look like you're about to say something.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with it. Like the perception of even if there is no real conflict of interest, I would be concerned about the perception of that from that perspective. So that's I'm not sure what anyone else thinks about that. Sometimes perception is reality when it comes to that. I maybe too much of a sticky wicket, but
well, and in the past we have turned down requests for membership to SEAC based on fee for service. Well, maybe not all of the services are fee for service. It could seem to be an endorsement or by having them on SEAC, it could be seen as an endorsement of SEAC of their particular service. So I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on that they want to add or what they're thinking. Donna, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I tend to agree, just to agree with you, Eva and Tara, that there is a bit of concern. Although I know like all our associations might end up, it's not a necessary service, but we have a special event and we'll ask them to, you know, donate whatever, that's different. This is actually a fee for service that they provide. And we have, and yes, they get there's partial funding from another ministry in particular. So I have a bit of issue as I'm actually coming as a voting member from that perspective. And I think we also, we did turn down because another group, because of the fact that it would give that perception that we are endorsing a particular group as well. So although I know the Participation House and some of the programs that they offer and so forth, I just not feeling comfortable and they fit in the criteria under SEAC.
Yeah, that was sort of my thinking on that. Like, I know they do good work, as did I know Nova's Arc. You know, they do phenomenal work. It's just that perception piece that we, have tried to stay away from, sort of allowing, any sort of bias, sort of leaning towards SEAC receiving voice that's paid for in any way, shape, or form. And I think it's the first time we've had a request for an organization that's funded through another ministry as well, right? So I think that's probably one of my big concerns as well. So, but it's if we'd be looking for SEAC to somebody on SEAC to make a motion on whether or not we accept or decline. Donna, go ahead.
It's basically, because you're, again, the SEAC doesn't actually approve, remember, it's just a motion to say that we don't recommend to the Board of Trustees the approval of this organization, and that would be the motion.
Okay. yeah, based on, the discussion around fee for service and funding from another ministry. Does anybody want to make that motion? Tara, seconders? Kathy, all in favor? If you can raise your hand if you don't have your screen on. Okay, motion passed.
Eva, point of clarification on that.
Yeah.
Bridging off something Donna said, because one of the questions when this came forward kind of in April, and I flagged for the team that we may be submitting a motion to the board package. The question that came, just so that it's transparent around this table, was that if SEAC wasn't making the recommendation, would there still be a motion to board? Does it then conclude at the SEAC table, or because the regulation states that SEAC doesn't have control over SEAC membership, does the motion to not recommend go to board to be concluded at that table? So I just want to make sure that we're following process fairly and accurately in terms of SEAC's understanding of that.
Donna, you had your hand up there.
I mean, technically, it's not a motion. It's just that it could be in the minutes, basically saying that we received this and the motion is there saying that we don't recommend to the board, and the minutes go to the board. That would be enough, as long as it's in the minutes, right? Because it wouldn't make sense to have a negative motion go ahead to the board. So just the fact that we're not recommending it, it's recorded in the minutes, and that those minutes go to the board for basically for information, right?
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So our request, just so that we can get a timely response to Participation House, would be that then the recommendation of SEAC will not be in approved minutes to board until September, or if we're into currently two boards from now is September. So would it be possible, just a staff request, that when we collectively, Donna, you, when you bring forward the approved April minutes, that part of the verbal report that accompanies it, that a membership consideration was made, concluding the conversation started in April, because it's going to be anchored. Part A of this conversation will be anchored in the minutes that are in the June board package. And then do you mind orally referencing that we concluded the conversation and that this was the recommendation of SEAC and will be formally brought forward in the approved minutes in September?
I agree that can be done, but didn't we send a letter from the chair as well to?
We do. Yeah, I just need to close it off with the board within the current school year. And then it'll just be noted, but not need to be discussed in September. Puts it in proximity. I think because it's in the April minutes, there's a lens in the June board package already with the minutes approved this evening. That if you don't mind just orally tying that on, then we can do that. So what I'm going to do is I'll draft and just send to Rob and just get him to confirm, and then we'll send it off if that's okay, and then pass it into your inbox.
That would be great.
I guess doing that support.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And sorry, Eva, I just wanted to make sure while we were transparent around the committee and where language was going.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's fine. I appreciate that. The next item, sorry, I've lost my agenda here. The next item under business arising from the minutes was the SEAC committee's meeting preference survey. Andrea, would you have the results of that?
Yeah, so, and again, because we surveyed like over the last couple, like I think every time we go forward a couple of weeks, things change. But at the time, SEAC indicated virtual to conclude the school year and then return to in-person in September. But there were members that were inquiring about the hybrid model as well and giving that option, particularly in the winter months, about the potential or around individual accommodation, just quietly being able to select. So strong preference for the ability to have in-person discussion, but a little bit of a hang on, but could we still? So I think that will come up in the letter tonight as well from another district. But we would be virtual for June with planning room bookings for September at this time, based on the feedback from those that submitted.
Okay, great. Thank you. And yeah, I mean, I would like us to be able to figure out a way to, if for sure, at least to have the streaming side of it, if not the hybrid model. I'm not sure what that would be like to chair a hybrid model. I have not done that. So that would be further discussion, but maybe to have in September, if we have sort of developed the capability or figure out that sort of other at least recording piece. Okay, so I confirm I did not receive any association reports or committee reports. And just a reminder to SEAC as a whole, if you have any association reports or committee reports that you want brought forward at a meeting, discussing events or whatever happening with your association, please circulate that to myself and Lisa ahead of time. And we will make sure that that's brought up at the meeting. Okay, so moving on to the correspondence, we have a number of pieces of correspondence. So I made just a couple of notes on all of them. So the first one was from the Conseil Scolaire Vaillant. I'm sorry, I probably really butchered that. My French is horrible. Regarding PPM 81, which sort of echoes a lot of what most of us boards had put out there. A letter from the Near North with respect to online learning.
May I provide a quick update on PPM 81?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. So at this time, the information that we have is that the revision to PPM 81 has been paused for further consultation, and then the provincial writ dropped. So, yes.
Good. Okay. That was a good pause.
I apologize for not including that in the bid report.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Thank you. I was actually wondering what had happened with that. The Near North with respect to concerns with respect to online learning and equity, Superior Greenstone's virtual meeting. So they're a very large board where they are distance-wise, not necessarily numbers-wise, but distance-wise. They have hundreds of kilometers between schools. And there's requests for virtual meetings to be allowed to continue. For them, it's increased their attendance and prevented long travel distances. Some of them travel up to 4 hours, would have to travel up to 4 hours in either direction for a SEAC meeting. I know for us, that's not, that's kind of not mirrored our experience necessarily. We've had a little bit more issues with quorum with virtual than sort of in person, more towards the end of a meeting. But I don't know if anybody else has any sort of comments with respect to that letter. Then the Thames Valley, which is addressing several things: COVID protocols, online learning, SIP funding, and PPM 81. That was actually a very well-written letter, interesting letter to read. And the Upper Grand with respect to PPM 81. Waterloo, talking about suspensions and expulsions reporting. That letter, I actually was looking at that thinking that is something that we should talk a little bit about as far as whether or not, I don't know there's much point in writing too many letters right now because I don't think anybody's reading them. But it's something that we might want to consider looking at just based on sort of that equity piece. So that one essentially was the motion was that Waterloo Region District School Board write a letter to the Ministry of Education requesting that The suspension/expulsion annual reports and monthly suspension and slash expulsion reports be amended to include an in-depth analysis of students with exceptionalities that have been suspended or expelled, and this analysis also includes the different types of exceptionalities, the number of students with exceptionalities that have been suspended or expelled. And I do find that it, is actually would be very good information for a SEAC. Donna, I see you have your hand up for that.
Yeah, and I'll just give you some background on some of the discussion we had on the K-12. And, considering our board has, I believe, has had 0 expulsions, there wouldn't be anything in there. But suspensions, and there's a difference between suspensions and in-school suspensions that are used, and the reporting that doesn't happen around in-school suspensions, and that a lot of it is. And there was also a discussion around exclusions and how it's not necessarily that an exclusion is called an exclusion, but how a student can be temporarily excluded from, and this is from a provincial perspective around the K-12, can be excluded by not being able to have services that are available due to, which did happen around COVID particularly, right? So, the biggest thing is what the current data is collected and what isn't collected in this particular letter. So it's really hard, but it warrants a discussion on what data is collected, especially from, Kathy alluded to that earlier, as far as we don't necessarily have a clear, picture of what data is collected that can be synthesized for SEAC to look at around some of those issues. I know we also collect information around incidences that would also maybe help as far as that's concerned, and that sort of categorized by type of incident, not as long as which we've received, but those are things that could also be talked about. But it is the integration or intersection of some of that information as well. So yeah. Anyways, you took my words out of my mouth about P281. Thanks.
Andrea, I see you have your hand up.
So interesting, right? Lots of layers. And I think Donna did a really great job of overviewing the different forms and definitions. And absolutely 100% correct. There is no compulsory district level data on those in-school pieces. I put my principal hat back on, and I know colleagues on screen. I always kind of figured if somebody was demonstrating some decision making that needed additional coaching, they got more time, not less time, in terms of, we're going to spend some more time together than less time. And if a student's doing that because they don't feel engaged or welcome or belonging, saying don't come, that has mixed messages in it as well. So some conversations there, also bridging within the safety of all students and staff and our responsibilities there. And that there are some things that say, hey, we need to take a pause and regroup, and then be welcome back. And it's the how of the welcome back to that matters. But the only thing I would add to kind of Donna's overview of kind of those types of responses, including exclusion, specific to our kids too, is modified day is a form of exclusion. Depending, and there's a big difference between a family going, I would like to access this percentage of the program because of, and feeling that the school has imposed, right? Very different narratives. One is authentically honoring voice and choice of a family, and the other is systemic barriers. And so between inclusive student services and positive school climate, we're having some discussions around what data would our school teams, what would be of benefit to our school teams to have to kind of unpack and track own kind of patterns and things like that. In terms of modified day, how do we grab that information and really work around informing programs and services, right? Because if there's some trends within that data that are really on ours to pick up at a district level of how we support our schools and students, how do we access that information? And looking at that, but the ministry is moving on mandatory reporting requirements that do include how many students with IEPs in terms of that. So we're just looking at that, but there is that lens too of modified day and making sure that anytime we're moving a student out of their regular program, we're actually putting limits and barriers on their access to learning and well-being. So sometimes with great intent, and as I said, there are times that we do need to take a pause and regroup, but how do we know what's going on and what the impacts, and really about open conversations. I think it goes back to the conversation around the table about why the SEAC survey and what information you need. It's around what are the impacts and understanding, and what are the relationships and communication within those decisions. And how do we get good feedback to even understand those impacts to dig in. But again, it's the student absolutely always, the impact to them, the school team, because we are, we want to provide a learning environment, learning in every definition in terms of that safe workplace. But then how do we also understand the experience of our kids and families and staff in a way that informs how we're supporting at a district level and our accountabilities there.
Thank you. Kathy, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you. I appreciate how we've raised the modified day as being a form of exclusion. And I would argue that virtual has sometimes also been another form of exclusion, particularly as students are older. And that management for behaviors is that direction is suggested, encouraged, directed out of face-to-face at times, possibly as a consequence to the good intentions of programming. The one thing I wanted to mention is that when this started to come through, there's very little discussion about victim or survivor as maybe a more positive term, and that when there are incidents that are violent, we're not necessarily gathering information about the other child or the other children. And so while we have to meet ministry mandate, I wonder if there's also some thought going into the other piece. Often the child who is the victim of the aggressive behavior, the person who is on the ground it also might be staff. I'm not suggesting it's not, but there are many children who are our students who have IEPs who are also on the other side of that as well. And I think that sometimes is getting missed, particularly because of trying to find the right programming and supports for the child who is struggling, who is initiating these incidents, or these incidents are emerging as a result of a lack of programming that supports the child. But there is that other lens as well that I feel is being missed still, because, and I appreciate we have bullying tools and all those other pieces, but I think some of our kids are also suffering on the other end of this as well.
Sorry, Tara, go ahead.
Yeah, no, a really great point, Kathy. Something else perhaps that we should be considering as well, which again, you probably might not get into the data, but not just necessarily the students directly involved in any of the incidents, but any students that are exposed to the incident in terms of impact to mental health and in terms of how that impacts the child's day and their perceptions of safety and their, because just because you weren't actually subject to the incident, but you witnessed it, it can be impactful, right? The same thing, grief counseling that we have, if we have, other incidents going on in the school, other children in the school are impacted by that. And I don't know if that's something that we would even be able to track, other than, you know, help, I need help button hitting on the website, but not every student is going to do that, right? But that impact is there as well.
Go ahead, Andrea.
So I think all really great points for us to take back and hear as a team. I think largely it depends, right? And so sometimes it's getting that system consistency, because we do have pockets where there is an incident experience, there is a really thorough think through of impact to any of the students or staff immediately. And then, as Tara, you said, the next ring. Because I do know, as Lisa and I work with Sarah and Carolyn and Psych and Soch, there is a layer of class debrief, low impact debriefing sometimes with a whole class or students impacted, and we do notify parents in terms of, hey, we've had this conversation, but it depends on individual circumstances and also kind of the context of the school. Different educators are set up differently in terms of being able to navigate some of those conversations as well. But it is certainly something within the scope of practice for those two teams is doing low impact debrief. Sometimes they are absolutely embedded in some of the debrief with staff in terms of looking at what happened, how do we mitigate risk, how do we amplify the supports, and then in some occasions are doing low impact debrief group work within the classroom.
Okay, great. Does anybody else have any comments they want to make with respect to that? You know, like I said, I think, I don't know if SEAC, if we want to bring it, you know, sort of forward in September for discussion about whether or not we want to write our own letter sort of with respect to you know, what the ministry is looking at doing, or like I said, I don't know that writing any letters at this point in time, I think they're going to land on an empty desk. And I think, you know, and by the time that desk is somebody sitting at it, there's going to be so much that it's just going to get ignored. I just wonder if it's something we should revisit in September and have a discussion about around then. Yeah. Okay. So we'll move that. We'll bring that forward next in September. Okay. Does anybody else have anything, questions, comments, or anything they want to discuss about with respect to the amount of the correspondence that we received? No? Okay. Moving on then to community concerns. Does anybody have anything that they would like to bring up? No? Okay, then celebrations and successes. Do we have any of those this month? No? Oh, you're muted there, Andrea.
Oh, sorry, may we just reference that the Abilities Track and Field Meet is back.
Yes.
And it is open invitation to SEAC members. I think it's one of the greatest days of joy in the school year. I know where I'll be that day. And just in terms of some of our staff, so I think of our two clerical team members that action our special education, like the equipment, we're sending them to help out at the meet so they can literally see what they help empower for kids in motion on that day. So our clerical team's going out, a number of department team members are going out to assist just with mitigating supply and absences in schools. We know we can't, we need to do some different adjustments, but I just think for team members, all team members serve kids. Sometimes there's just a few more layers in between the direct relationship. So our team will be out supporting on that day. So please hope for sunshine that day. A little bit of cloud cover would be great for the kids. And any SEAC member, please let Lisa and I know if you'd like to be by. And if you're not able to, our communications team will be out and capturing the joy of the day as well.
So what's the date for that again, Andrew?
Lisa, the 17th? Yeah, Lisa's not here.
17th of June, right?
Correct, at Oshawa Civic Field.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, since Renab, I see you have your hand up.
I do. Although this week has been very hard, my heart has been with my brothers and sisters in Buffalo. I did have a bright spot this week because I attended the PIC parent symposium, and there was almost 550 parents in attendance. They did do pizza orders to families who pre-ordered, but most of all, the question and answer section was hopping the whole entire session. So parents were engaged, they were asking questions. And from some of them, those questions, I do know that SEAC needs to do more to make themselves known, as well as maybe we need to start reiterating the processes behind accessing special education for your child. Now that parents are re-entering in person after the pandemic. But it was such a great event, We really highlighted the DDSB.
That's fantastic. Great. That's good to hear. Congratulations on organizing that, helping organize that and seeing that through. That's fantastic. It's always been a great event, and it seems to just get better. So, Donna, I see your hands up.
Yeah. I forgot to mention this in the board report, and I don't know why I forgot to, but one of the great successes is that we actually got capital project approval for our new secondary high school in Oshawa. I mean, that's after basically, I think, our 6th submission into, and I mean, we just overjoyed on ensuring that we got that, because poor Maxwell Heights and the other schools were basically feeling the pressures. And so we were really, really glad that happened. And that's, a lot of effort from our staff members going back that many times and trying to get, providing the data and also making a few tweaks as far as in order to get that. So that was a really, really good thing. And on a personal note, the drama program that my daughter is going to, and I just love the program, but because of all the people that run this particular program are basically recreation/occupational therapists, and they're just phenomenal. So they've gone back in person, and so they're going to go back to her first time with this group to basically a production that will be on stage instead of virtual. So she's so happy, and she's gotten to meet a lot of different people because it is based in Scarborough. So it's just been a really, really thrill. And again, it's getting those right fits, getting those great people that we have. And I know we have a lot of people that actually support Special Olympics as well, and that many of them I see when I've gone. So I'm looking forward. I've got it in my calendar. I've got an appointment in the morning, but I'm hoping that I can get there because it's such fun to see those kids be just have that opportunity and just having a great time, and even staff, like seeing staff have a great time. So it's a great thing to see.
Awesome, that's fantastic. I'm happy for her. Thank you, Donna. Rowan, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just listening to some of the talking and how we had the focus with the speech on the fundamental right to read, and I'm one of we have the scholarship, the ability scholarship that goes out every year. We partner with DDSB for that, and it just, we haven't chose yet, what have you, but it's when you read the story from the perspective of the student, and when you hear them explain that they started off with walls and challenges, and then you see that they were led or found or discovered systems to aid them in terms of be it technology, be it extra time, whatever it was that were needed, to see them get through these obstacles that they didn't think they would be able to get through when everything was too much for them, and to see them on the other side, you know, to now get to the point where I am going to university, I've been accepted here, what have you, or I'm going to college. You know, we can only award to one, unfortunately, but I would argue that the true win, if you will, is having that skill to take you on through life. And it's just kind of cool to see the kids, a firsthand account, to see them get through that from a, again, as a learning disability, but just regardless. So whenever you see them make these wins in whatever subject, it's kind of refreshing to know why we're here in the first place. So.
Yeah, gotta love that award. Some of the stories are very, very inspiring. So yeah, thank you. Does anybody else have any celebrations of successes? No? All right. Well, our next SEAC meeting is on June 16th, 2022, right here online. We just need a motion to adjourn. Tara, second by Kathy, all in favor? Have a great night, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.